Spencer, always a pleasure speaking to you. And we want to talk about Anthony Joshua because so much speculation around him at the moment. But I guess it's a loaded question. But since 2019, when he was heavyweight world champion, he had the 3 belts, he'd just beaten Alexander Povetkin. What has gone wrong since?
What's gone wrong since? Listen, 2018 he beat Povetkin, and then he lost to Andy Ruiz, didn't he, in 2019? He took that fight over in America. I don't think he was quite right going into that fight. We don't know the ins and outs of it, and he's never come out with any excuse to his credit. He lost to Ruiz. He then adapted his style to box Ruiz again in Saudi when we was out there, and it was a masterclass, if I'm totally honest. It was for the boxing purists, because heavyweight boxing, people like to see knockouts. Joshua went out there, he had a game plan. Now, I, for one, and he's a mate of mine, and I, for one, didn't think he would be able to stick to a game plan for 12 rounds and box on the back foot and stay away from Andy Ruiz. And he done it, so he showed that he'd improved from that. And then we saw him boxing after he boxed Ruiz. Who did he box after he boxed Ruiz?
He took on Pulev next in December last year.
Pulev, in the December. And again, he showed a little bit of the old fire that was in his belly, at times. And I text Joshua after that fight, actually. He said, listen, Pulev, you had him gone there in the 3rd round. You had him gone, Josh. Why didn't you jump on him? And he said, Spence, I learned from my mistakes from the first fight with Ruiz. He said, and I felt that he wasn't just ready to go, so I just wanted to get back on the boxing, and systematically break him down until the time was right. So that he showed that he's, still developing as a fighter. And I thought it was a great performance against Pulev. I thought he showed us again that he had that spike back in him, but he also mixed that with the boxing that he'd learned. I think tactically against Usyk, he got it totally wrong. He went out there and he tried to outbox one of the best boxers in the world, which was a bad thing to do. And Usyk really dominated the fight from the first bell to the last. He was in control of the fight, and Joshua was in desperate trouble in that last round as well. And Joshua got hurt actually a couple of times through that. I think that Joshua, if he needs to rediscover that rawness. He needs to rediscover that rawness, and he needs to look. He knows that he can box on the back foot. We know, we've seen the development and stuff, but Joshua's really effective when he goes out there and he takes the bull by the horns and he stamps his authority. And that's what he needed to do with Usyk, and he needed to gain Usyk's respect, but he didn't. He allowed him to get into his rhythm. And if you allow a great boxer to get into his rhythm, he's a difficult guy to beat. Joshua wants to go straight back into that immediate rematch. I spoke to him afterwards, and, we know what's going on here, James, with so many moving parts in this heavyweight division. Dillian Whyte's the mandatory, so he's meant to be boxing Tyson Fury next. Tyson Fury obviously wants to box Usyk for all the belts. Usyk has to have that immediate rematch with Anthony Joshua because Joshua stepped up and said that he wants the rematch. That was in the clause. And I think that, purse bids have been delayed again today, and they've been delayed to the 25th or the 26th of this month. They keep getting pushed back, and I think that's because they're trying to come to an agreement. The problem we've got is Dillian Whyte wants his shot. So they're obviously offering Dillian Whyte step-aside money, and they offer AJ step-aside money so that they can fight for all the belts. But then who out of Dillian Whyte and AJ boxes all for all the belts? Because we might see like another semi-final where AJ's got to box, Dillian Whyte. It's very, very, very confusing. And that's why I think they're pushing back on these purse bids, because they're trying to come to some sort of agreement. But if AJ's saying, well, I'll step aside, I'll let you two fight, but I've got to fight the winner. Well, then Dillian Whyte's saying the same, and that's the problem that we've got, because the WBC have said that Dillian Whyte is next in line. So he's got to do that, and obviously AJ has that immediate rematch. So I think what's going to happen is, I think AJ's going to go for the immediate rematch. AJ is not going to want... Look, he's a businessman as well, and he's going to be offered a colossal amount of money to step aside. I get that. And from a business point of view, you go, well, let them fight it out. Usyk's a difficult fight for me to win, and I've got to go back into that fight. Let them fight out, and I fight the winner then. That for AJ would be perfect. But Dillian Whyte's the stumbling block here. He's the problem because he wants his shot. And he's going, well, if I step aside, who's going to fight first? That me and Joshua. Do I have to go over old ground with Joshua? And it's complicated, mate. It really is.
It's absolutely fascinating what you're discussing there when it comes to the mess at the top of their heavyweight picture, but also about AJ and the conversations you've had with him. I want to go back to that first fight against Ruiz Jr. because he was a late change in opponent. It was supposed to be Jarrell Miller. We know why that fight didn't happen. And hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? But looking back now, should he have taken that fight against Ruiz Jr.? And what do you think went wrong during that fight? Do you think that defeat has taken something out of AJ that he's never been able to replace?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, we got to go right back to when he won the title against Klitschko. Was that 2015, 2016, whenever it was? When he won that fight, that took something out of AJ because he had to find something there. You know, Klitschko had him hurt and down in the, what was it, the 6th or 7th round or whatever it was. And it took AJ a long time to recover from it. That was a tough fight. And AJ recognised then, listen, it's not all about brute strength, power and explosive power. I need to work on my boxing skills. He sort of seemed to do that, and he had a couple of good wins. And then we get the Andy Ruiz situation. Late place replacement. AJ's looked at it and thought, you know what, this little guy, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to blast him out. But Ruiz is a dangerous guy. With anyone that stands with Ruiz, he's going to have trouble. Ruiz, one, is very, very durable. And two, you do not want to stand with him when he's letting those big left hooks and that go. So you have to box him. And AJ made the mistake because he hurt Ruiz early. And he made that mistake of that, just that fighting instinct and that, you know, that he's got. I'm going to go in there and finish it. And he switched off. And that's what happens in heavyweight boxing, James. One shot, boom, it turns around. We've seen that, you know, in the history of the sport. And we got that there with AJ versus Ruiz. I think he went in there, late place replacement. It was Jarrell Miller. Then they offered Dillian Whyte the shot. Do you remember that? And Dillian Whyte turned down a substantial amount of money to take that shot. He said it wasn't enough, which surprises me because you look at this Dillian Whyte situation and you go, look, mate, you want your title shot and now you've taken the WBC to court because you're not getting the title shot. The WBC have looked at their purses that they got in their previous fights and said, well, the split for you and Tyson Fury is 80-20, 80%, 20%. And Dillian's going, well, that's not enough money in it. I'm taking it to court. Now it's going to go to purse bids where you think, I know the money that he got offered to box Joshua and it was big. It was massive. I sort of know the money he's been offered to step aside and it's massive. What I'm saying is if you want your shot, you want your shot. Sometimes, like say again, he could have gone in there with that AJ one and he knows that he beat AJ as an amateur. He had AJ all over the place in the second round when he boxed for the Commonwealth title back in 2014, 2015. I can't remember what one it was. I was there at ringside and AJ was in desperate trouble, inexperienced, let Dillian down in that one. And you go, mate, sometimes I think, take the shot. The money, you take the shot and then you got your opportunity. Now, I get where he's at, Dillian, and he's frustrated and he just wants a fair shot at the title. But we get to this situation now, right, with all these moving parts and no one really knows what's going on. We're sort of hearing all these different things and things are changing overnight. But we get to the stage now where you're going to Dillian, if he takes step aside money, right? I can understand it from AJ because he's been beat by Usyk and AJ might think, well, let them tussle it out. I fight the winner for all the belts and then that's great. That's what, you know, they all want undisputed. I can understand it sort of from AJ's point of view, but for Dillian Whyte, if he does step aside, because we don't know what's going to happen yet, but if he does, you go, well, what's the last 3 years been all about? Do you know what I mean? I thought you wanted your shot. So it's one of those, mate. I think we could see Dillian Whyte versus Tyson Fury next. We could see that because that's the fight that's been ordered. And we could see AJ versus Usyk and then we could see winner fight winner. But we're not in a different place to when Fury was fighting Deontay Wilder, AJ was fighting Usyk and winner was going to fight winner. And then that's all sort of going to happen. So who knows what's going to happen next? I mean, it's a fascinating thing, but it feels like it's been going on forever.
It's fascinating, but I think it's infuriating for many fans as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I thought it was fascinating what you were saying about Dillian Whyte and a step-aside deal, because you would think in your head, if he stepped aside, when could he potentially actually get a fight against one of these boxers? Because if Tyson Fury fought Usyk is a great fight, maybe that's a rematch. Then you've got AJ there as well. I mean, do you think Dillian Whyte is seriously going to consider this step-aside deal? Surely he wants some clarification on when he get that fight, but can you ever really offer any real clarification and assurances in boxing?
Listen, I think that if he does take the step-aside deal, and it'll be for a colossal amount of money again, and this is a business at the end of the day, we want to earn as much money as possible, but of course they want the belts and everything else as well, and everyone wants to see that undisputed heavyweight champion. I get that, but we're in a situation right now, right, James, where we've got a lot of good heavyweights out there at the moment. So say if say if AJ was to step aside, Dillian steps aside, then they box for the undisputed. Then AJ boxes the winner of Usyk Fury for the undisputed. And say if AJ lost again, or if it didn't, what I'm saying is there's so many good names in the sport at the top there at the moment. They can all have big fights and still earn big money. A loss is not that damaging at the moment. Yeah, all right, they don't get undisputed. But if AJ lost again against whatever, he's still going to get big paydays when you've got like, you know, you've got your Joe Joyces coming through, your Philip Hrgovic's, you know, there's loads of them out there. Tony Oka's coming through as well. There's some big fights out there. Like the heavyweight division at the moment is the strongest it's been for many, many, many years. So I get that people want undisputed, but it's also a business as well. And there's a lot of pound notes flying around at the moment. That's why no one really knows what's going on.
I know we're going through a load of different topics here, but one thing I wanted to pick you up on was what you said at the beginning about AJ and the rematch against Ruiz Jr. And you described it as a masterclass. Why do you think it was so good? And did it surprise you that AJ was able to put on that sort of display? And what did that show, the fact that he was able to do that?
So let me break it down why it was a masterclass and why it was such a great performance, yeah? Because people were going, well, it was boring. AJ was keeping up, but he'd done what he had to do, right? So he didn't just get knocked out by a lucky shot, like, say, when Lennox Lewis boxed Oliver McCall, second round, boom, got knocked flat out. Or when he boxed Hussein Rahman and he got knocked flat out with one shot, but he won the rematches. That's a one punch, and all right, he was just unlucky. He was controlling the fight. But against Andy Ruiz Jr. in the first fight, AJ started well, and then from the third round when he got done, up until what round was it? It was over. Was it seventh round, ninth round, or whatever it was? Up until the point when he got done, he got a systematic beating, right? Now, to go into the immediate rematch, I'm speaking now as an ex-fighter, so I know how difficult this is. When they go into immediate rematches and the fighter's taken that much of a beating in the first fight, that's very hard to overcome. Spotlight comes on, ring walks come on, things come flashing back in your head. You've got all that going on in your head. So you've got all the demons to compete with, as well as the opponent in front of you who's gone from being a contender to champion. So when you're contender, you're here. When you're champion, it elevates you to another level. You perform at another level. I think Andy Ruiz maybe didn't train as well as he should have. That's one of the points, because he come in the ring, he was overweight or whatever else, but he was still dangerous and he was still the champion. AJ's got all these demons to deal with. He goes in there and he says, right, if I stand with this geezer and he tags me, I'm going to get done. So I'm going, the only way AJ can win this fight is by keeping it long for 12 rounds. He won't be able to keep it long for 12 rounds. The stamina won't allow him to keep it long for 12 rounds, because that's a lot of movement for a guy of that muscle bulk, that size, like 17 and a half stone or 17.1 or whatever he was then. But I like that. That's a difficult thing. So if you put all those things into place, you go, that's a masterclass, mate. You haven't gone in there. He hasn't gone in there. That's not like the first fight they've had. He's coming off a knockout. Trust me, as a fighter, I know that's not an easy thing to deal with. AJ probably spent the best part of 12 weeks going to bed thinking about that knockout, waking up thinking about that knockout. Then you know you're getting back in there with a guy that's knocked you out. That's not easy, James. Trust me. I know it's easy for people in hindsight to sit in their armchairs and go, whoa, you know what? All right, that was boring. No, he didn't get involved. I go, yeah, no, but mate, you've got to know what's going on. You've got to be a fighter to understand that. There's a lot of demons here, and this game is 20% physical, 80% mental. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, and that's the truth of it. Like, so me and you are fighting. Let me break it down for you. Me and you are fighting. We both do the same runs. We both go on the same thing. So we're both as fit as each other, but it's all about the psychology, the mental strength. Do you know what I'm saying? And when I've been in fights before and I've got in to the penultimate rounds, 9, 10, 11, 12, mate, it's not about boxing skill then and everything else. It becomes then mental. Everything is mental, because the physicality is you're both getting tired. It's about who can push on better, who can be strong. Like AJ had to deal with all that in those penultimate rounds. Right, just keep out of that range, keep it together. Where the other guy's thinking, Ruiz is thinking, I'm just going to tag him with one shot and I've got him. So, you know, a lot of it is strategy, and a lot of it is psychology. And that's what it comes down to in the sport. People don't understand that. People think it's just about the physicalities, and it's not.
It really is fascinating speaking about this subject. And with AJ, I guess when we're trying to work out what led to what happened against Usyk in September. I wonder if you go back even further to the fight against Pulev, was there anything that you saw in that fight that maybe made you worry heading into the Usyk fight, or makes sense when you look at what happened against Usyk? Because on paper it was quite a routine mandatory defence, but I wonder if then you saw signs that maybe things weren't going according to plan and we weren't seeing the AJ that we had seen in previous years.
No, right. So I'm going to take you back to Usyk versus Derek Chisora in October 2021, was it, when we was all in lockdown? And AJ versus Pulev, yeah? So after those two had boxed, so that he boxed Derek Chisora, and Derek Chisora showed the blueprint on how to beat Usyk. You know, stick on his chest, outwork him, man him, you know, out-strength him, you know, the heavyweight, showed that he's a cruiserweight coming up. So Derek showed the blueprint, and AJ, for me, against Pulev, boxed superbly. When I watched it, I was like, wow, he's improved, man. He's coming on. And actually, I'm seeing a little bit of that spite and a bit of that fire back in his belly. I'll go like, yeah. So going into the Usyk fight, I thought, you know what might happen here? AJ might just go in there and blast him out. And this could be a quick job. Even if Usyk boxes him and fiddles him around for a few rounds, AJ's going to get him. Not at one point did I think Usyk was going to win that fight. Coming off the back of those fights, I thought, you know, looking at the performances, Usyk looked pretty mediocre against Derek. Very mediocre. And Joshua looked good against Pulev. So I'm going, wow, Joshua's like a massive favourite in this. But he didn't perform on the night. He went out there and tactically got it wrong. And what it is, James, as well with this, again, it's not just about the physical side of things. It's at top level, it's all about tactics and getting it right. And if you get the tactics wrong, they're difficult to adjust through the contest. And one man gets into a rhythm, then you're in real trouble. There's a lot more to boxing than two geezers getting in a ring, which the majority of people watch. Have you boxed before, James? Have you ever like pad work?
Not properly, nothing like you or AJ or anything even recreational for that matter.
What I'm saying is, when you get in there, and it's like there's a lot more that meets the eye than just getting in there and two geezers bashing each other up. You know, it's very tactical. Like I say, it's you know, it's very you know, what's the word I was using?
It's more to do with the mind than it's not a pub brawl.
Absolutely.
It's so much more to
psychology. The psychology. That's what I'm saying. It's not just a physical thing. It's the psychology of it all. Tactical. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It is going to be fascinating to see what happens next with this rematch. But I think one thing that's really interesting actually is the secrecy, the mystery that has surrounded AJ since that defeat, because we're still waiting for real clarification on what he's doing. We know there is going to be some changes behind the scene, but what have you made of I guess, the secrecy in what AJ is doing at the moment?
I know what he's doing, and I know that he's grafting his arse off. I know that for a fact, and I know that all he wants to do is get in there and right the wrongs. You know, and I've spoke to him about that, and he says, listen, I don't want to step aside. I don't want to do that. I want to get back in there, and I want to put myself back in the position where I'm the top dog again, because he knows that stepping aside, sort of people like, you know, he might lose a little bit of respect from the fans, as Dillian Whyte will and everything else. He goes like, I just want to get in there, beat Usyk, and then get my shot at Fury, because ultimately he just wants that undisputed title, but he also wants to box the best, you know, and that's what, and I think that. And that is what AJ wants to do. That is what I can say. He's out there grafting his arse off, because that's what he does. He works hard. The guy don't drink, he don't smoke, he don't party. He just grafts. He like lives, eats, sleeps boxing. And that loss was playing on his mind. And he's frustrated because he recognises that he got it so badly wrong. And that's what frustrates him. And he wants to get in there now and be the AJ of old. That's what he said. He said, I've got to tear up the script of trying to be the clever boxer, trying to do this. He said, like, I was like, why would you try and go in there and outbox someone? Like, why wouldn't you do that in the gym or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Don't do it on fight night. Go in there and beat AJ that gets rid of this geezer. And then when it comes to a time when you've got to do it against a big heavyweight or whatever, but don't try and outbox Oleksander Usyk. That's a bad move, you know?
I think sometimes the trainers can be the fall guys. You know this in the business. If you lose a fight, sometimes it's the trainer that is the first to go, and that's just the way things are. Do you think that we all know that AJ needs to change his mindset and change his game plan for that second fight. I think he'd admit that himself. But is he making the right choice to try and change up his thinking when it comes to his training setup and who he's working with?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think what it is when you get to that sort of stage, so if he brings a new trainer in, that changes his mindset. That gives him added confidence because he's like, he needs something else now. He needs to add something to the team. That's what I'm saying. You bring in a new trainer, you think, oh, great, he's got a new trainer. So what's the trainer going to do? What's the trainer going to put into him? What's the trainer going to show him and da-da-da? Him having a new trainer in there will give him more added confidence. And that's, again, it's the psychology of the sport. Oh, I'm feeling better because I've brought something in. So whether the new trainer introduces something or he doesn't, AJ mentally feels better. He feels more confident. Do you know what I mean? And confidence is a massive thing in the sport as well. So again, it's all the psychology, isn't it? It's like, so yes, I think that, say if he brings a Ronnie Shields in or someone like that, and he knows stuff and he'll show AJ stuff, but ultimately that will give AJ more added confidence that he's sort of changed things up a little bit. I think he recognises that sometimes that's good for a fighter. It freshens a fighter up.
And finally, what do you think is going to happen here? Because as you were saying, AJ is desperate to right the wrong. He's desperate to have this rematch. But we're in a situation now, which we thought had been put to bed a few weeks ago about a potential step-aside deal. So what's going to happen if Eddie Hearn goes to AJ with the step-aside deal? Yes, it will be for a huge amount of money. There may be a guarantee that he fights the winner. But do you think he just wants to get in there with Usyk now? And do you think that the next fight we will see will be Usyk against Joshua and Fury against Whyte?
I think he wants to get in there. Well, I know that he wants to get in there with Usyk again. I know that that's what he wants. But also, money does talk. And if the right deal, it's not about the money that they're going to get for step-aside, say Dillian Whyte and AJ. It's about the plan that's put into place. That's why I think they've gone to another purse bid again, because I think that we know the money that's on the table, but that's great. I'm happy to sit on my backside, take 10 million quid step-aside money and go, well, I'm fighting to win if I've got 10 million quid anyway. But that's great, but there's got to be a plan in place, isn't there? And I think the problem you've got is Dillian Whyte's position and AJ's position. Someone's got to fight for the title. So it's about who, when, and what. Do you know what I'm saying? So even me and you sitting here now, it's confusing me even speaking about it. But I understand the process and what's going on. But I just don't know how they're going to put that deal in place for AJ to get shot and Dillian Whyte to get a shot, because only one man can fight. And as we know, anything can happen in heavyweight boxing. Say if AJ boxes, let's just say, there you go, this one for you. Say that AJ steps aside, Dillian Whyte steps aside. Fury boxes Usyk. Fury beats Usyk and then says, you know what? I don't want to box anymore. I'm undisputed. I've cleaned up the division. I've lost faith in it. I'm done.
Which is realistic, which is something that Fury could do, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then the titles might get fragmented and they all go everywhere. AJ boxes so-and-so, Dillian Whyte boxes so-and-so for the WBC, AJ boxes for the W. What I'm saying is anything can happen. And that's the problem that you've got. You've got two guys in a position. It's very complicated because we've got four guys up there at the moment and it's a very complicated situation. And I just don't know how it's going to turn out.
Very, very final one. As you say, we're almost playing fantasy boxing here. There's so many hypotheticals.
Well,
but for instance, if AJ was to step aside and Usyk was to fight Fury, I think it would take a while to make that fight. So say that's April, May. The earliest that they'd then fight again, you'd think would be maybe October, November. So in the meantime, would AJ have to have a fight? Would he need to have a fight? And who
James, this is the other complication, right? So Dillian's in his position. We saw what happened when he put it on the line. He got knocked out by Povetkin last time. He nearly lost everything that he'd been waiting for 3 years. So if AJ has to have a warm-up fight, it's going to have to be against someone that's pretty decent because you can't, they're at that level. Same as Dillian Whyte. As we've seen in heavyweight boxing, anything can happen. Knockouts happen. If one of them loses, it's all done anyway. So, yeah, it's mad. It's mad. It is, but you're right at the moment. Everyone seems to be playing fantasy boxing at the moment because it's such a complicated situation. Look, so I live, eat, sleep, breathe the sport, and I speak to people like AJ. I'm speaking to promoters, and we're doing nothing. We speak to Bob Arum, we speak to Frank Warren, speak to Eddie Hearn. No one really knows. It's like, it's one of those situations, just like, it's bizarre, man. All my time in the sport, which is like over sort of 30 odd years, I can't remember a time like this, as in it being as complicated as this.
Well, let's hope it's a great year for the heavyweights in 2022.
We said that last year, didn't we?
On you soon, yeah.
We said that last year, and we didn't get it until the last couple of months when you had that unbelievable fight with Fury and Wilder, which was incredible, fight of the year. Then we get AJ getting turned over, which was meant to be this great fight at Tottenham Stadium. AJ gets turned over. Now we've gone back to the beginning again, where, you know what I mean? Like, it seems to have been going now for 2 years. But let's hope this year we get the answers that we need, and we get the fights that we need. I'm sure we will. But like I say, even if all those guys at the top and the young guns that are coming through, the guys that are on the fringe like Joyce and Oka and all that, there's all great fights there, mate. Like, win or lose, they're all interesting fights still. So yeah, we're going to get something this year, I'm sure. But I can't give you the answers, James. I'm sorry, mate. I can't give you the answers. I hope I haven't confused too many people by the way I've been speaking, because I've sort of been going all over the place. But do you know what I mean? That's pretty much where it is.